Alright, so these notes are about the moon and moon phases. So first we're going to set up our notes. Your title is going to be the moon. And our two essential questions are, what are the features of the moon and what are the phases of the moon? So the moon. How do we gather data about the moon? Well, we use telescopes. We use the moon landings. There have been 6 since we've started the space program. We use rock samples, which tell us about what the Earth used to look like, and we have space probes and satellites. So the moon basically has 4 distinct features, and the first is craters, which are bowl-shaped depressions on the moon's surface. And this is created by the impacts of objects, such as asteroids, meteors, maybe satellites, if they crash down. They also have what are called maria, which are large, dark, flat surfaces on the moon, and a lot of scientists think that these were formed by large space objects hitting the moon, and then the craters filled with lava, creating the flat, black, dark surfaces. They actually look black. So 2 features that are very similar to Earth are highlands and valleys. And the highlands are basically what look like the light-colored regions near the poles of the moon. They have the highest elevation. They're basically mountains. And they seem to have more craters than other spots on the moon, mostly because they're easier to hit because they're mountains. And then we have valleys, which are basically narrow depressions that are much like the valleys on Earth. So the moon has what are called phases, and the phases are called by the revolution of the moon around the Earth. And the moon revolves around the Earth much slower than the Earth rotates. So the shape of the moon we see is known as the phase of the moon, although the moon does not actually change shape. It's basically the amount of the lit side of the moon that we see does. So at any point, at all times, half of the moon faces Earth and the other half faces the sun. The half of the Earth we always see, or the lit side, never changes. The same side of the moon always faces the Earth. That's going to be important. So basically, we have 6 different moon phases. We have the new moon, which just popped up on the screen there. That's where the lit side of the moon faces away from the Earth, and you either cannot see the moon or you can barely see it. Then we have the waxing phase, where the lit side is getting larger. That also just went by. We have the first quarter, where the right half of the lit side of the moon, you can see that. So this side of the moon here would be lit up. We're going to see that in a second when I start the animation. And then we have the full moon, which you can see here. The waning moon, where the lit side of the moon is getting smaller. And then the third quarter, where you can see the left half of the moon. So we're going to start here at the full moon, and we are going to do the animation. So, as you see, it's getting smaller. That's waning. So light is always going to move from right to left on the moon. So this is the waning phase, and this is actually called the waning gibbous. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then about here, we see about half of the moon. That's the third quarter. So the left side is lit up. And as we continue, it continues to go away. And then we have the new moon. And then we see the moon start to come back. Now we see the right side of the moon. That's your first quarter. And it's now waxing in its waxing phases. So now the lit side is getting larger, as you can see here. And then we arrive back at the new moon again. Okay, so we need to copy these 2 diagrams into your notes. This basically shows you a picture of what each of the phases look like. So we have our new moon, where you can barely see anything. You have your waxing crescent, where the light is coming from. And then you have the first quarter, where the left side of the moon is lit up. You have your waxing gibbous, where the moon is starting to get a little larger. You have your full moon. You have your waning gibbous. You have your last quarter. And your waning crescent. And this one shows you where and how the moon rotates around the Earth. So we have our new moon here. Then we have our waxing crescent. And this one's actually showing you the light moving the correct way. So, then our first quarter, our waxing gibbous, where the light starts to get past the half of the moon, Our full moon where the whole lit side is lit up. Our waning gibbous where now it's starting to get dark again. Our last quarter, or our half moon, which is here. Now you can see the left side of the moon. Our waning crescent, and then our new moon again. And that's all.